My name is Payal Patel. I was born and brought up in Britain, and I moved to India about 10 years back to do my Montessori training. So I have started my career here in India in the Montessori field. I'm now trained between the ages of 2 to 9 as a Montessori trained teacher. I set up the Montessori School International in 2012, so it's been running for 8 years now. So Montessori education, it's very different, so I just want to start with that point. So there's many concepts, so I'll start with Maria Montessori, who is the lady who behind the Montessori method. So she learned about this method and researched this by being in the classroom with children, working with children, teaching them, and then realizing that the most important thing she can do is observe the children. So she sat back and observed and learned tremendous amounts about the children and how, what needs they have at this certain age groups. So from her research, there's some very important key factors. She realized that children work better when they're being given freedom, freedom of choice, freedom of movement. So that's one very important aspect of Montessori education. Another is it's very child-centric. So what that means is we are following the child. We're looking at their interests, we're looking at their readiness, and allowing the child to kind of create their own educational path. There's many reasons, building that right foundation from the initial education and giving them that right foundation, that beginning does matter. Okay, why? Because a child at the age of 2 is very curious. Naturally, as a child, everyone wants to learn. Okay, the child wants to learn. Now it's up to the educator to ensure that we keep that curiosity and not kill it. So some methods of education may kill it. So the idea is to keep that curiosity in the child, and we are natural learners. So that's the main reason I would feel with the Montessori method. That is debatable, and so I would say we have a program from the age of 2, which is I'm trained from the age of 2 onwards. However, there is also a toddler Montessori program. So I would say if you were needed to put your child into some program before the age of 2, then why not Montessori? But in terms of the readiness of the child, it all comes down to the child individually. So we would look for certain things in the child, such as just basic physical coordination, just being able to walk, carry material, do those basic independent aspects, and then the rest we would build on with the child. So for the 2 to 6 program, we have the practical life, the sensorial, the language, and mathematics, and there's culture within that as well. Okay, so can I start with the practical life, which is usually the first activities children work with when they come into the environment. These are activities which they see in the home environment every day. Okay, so they are drawn to them, and they instantly know the purpose of these activities, but they're now in this environment child size. So so the child has that opportunity now to achieve tasks that in the home environment maybe they just do a little bit of or whatever. So examples I can give you is all our care of environment activities, cleaning windows, scrubbing worktops, dustpan and brush, mopping, dusting, all those kind of activities. With care of person, we have dressing frame activities, there's some cooking activities, needlework activities, and then we have what comes under there is the grace and courtesy, which is actually something which is about how to be in the environment, because of course we give a lot of freedom in the environment to the children, but we have to take care that they cooperate and there is a sense of courtesy with the rest of the members who are in the classroom. So there would be lots of kind of how-to, like how to share your snack, or how to observe, or how to walk around the classroom. So, so we'd have to teach, so it's kind of like setting the boundaries of the classroom and for the children to know the rules. And when it comes to literacy then, we would start with a game called I Spy. So with this game, the child learns that words are broken down into sounds. Okay, so we teach them not the usual I Spy that maybe at home you would teach, but more phonetically. Okay, so that is, it would be, instead of saying A, you would say A. Instead of B, it would be. So that's how the phonetics would work, and that's how we would teach them, because that would gear them up towards more writing activities. So one key thing in Montessori education is that writing comes before reading. And the idea of this is that it's more natural for a human being to express their own thoughts than to read an author's thoughts. By the end of our program, up to the age of 6 this is, they're generally reading basic, not just reading, but also comprehension is happening. So it's all done in a fun way, using games, using activities, but it's all there in the environment for them to learn language. When it comes to culture, we're covering it in different ways in the Montessori environment through the different areas, as well as through some group time at the end. I think when anything is child-centric, we're following the child, we're looking at the child's needs, rather than we deciding or assuming what the child needs. We're actually really figuring out what the child needs and giving it to them. How could there be anything better than that in terms of a child being able to come out of their shell, blossom, you know, at that moment in time, what is what they need? So we're addressing that. Yeah, so there's one really beautiful line in, that Maria Montessori has said, something along the lines of, the point of education should be that we should be trying to reveal the true nature of the child, so the child reaches their full potential in a joyful manner. Okay, so it's a very interesting question, because I think I'd like to just bring it back to simplicity, the child. Okay, the child, every child needs to learn, needs their own pace to learn. Even in terms of the early development of a child, you see a child might start walking at the age of 1 year, another one at 14 months. So every child has their own pace. Now, the idea of Montessori education is to allow the child to grow at their own pace and develop at their own pace, and not really pressurize them, but give them enough. Yeah, sometimes people feel that you have to pressurize and whatever, but actually what you're doing is the child might regress and they lose their interest. Right? So this is give the child what they need at the moment they need it. Another important aspect, as you mentioned, competition. So yes, we're living in this competitive world, but the Montessori method, the Montessori philosophy is a very non-competitive philosophy. So what that means is in our environment, it says it all, like children are all working at their own different pace, they're all at different stages because it's a mixed age group. There's a sense that you're achieving something for your own best. You know, wherever you are, you're being your best. We don't need to compare. If that child is up here, yes, you do your best, but it doesn't mean you have to be there yet. So it's a non-competitive. A lot of parents may not even completely agree with this, because there's always this, no, we have to compete, we have to compete. But I feel it's actually a demotivator to most children when there is competition, because if they feel they can't achieve that, then they generally give up, right? So why not always just compete with yourself rather than compete with that top person in the classroom or whatever? I think it's a process, and I think within the environment, sometimes it's easier. Like I was talking about the grace and courtesy work we do. So we would have a set of rules which the team would initially give to them all in a way of in kind of in a positive way. So it would be how to do this, how to walk, how to be in a library corner, how to eat your snacks, how to, if you would like to go outside, how to ask a teacher, how not to interrupt. So there would be lots of how-tos. Now, if we know that they're really testing the boundary, generally what works is that this child probably needs a little bit more. They need a little bit more logic, a little bit more reasoning on why we have that rule. A real life example which has happened quite recently, a boy who just absolutely didn't want to put away his work. Okay, and in the Montessori environment, there's a rule of, okay, you take your work from the shelf, you sit with it on your mat or the table, work with it, and then you put it away. And the idea of putting it away is because then the next child can take it. And we only have one of each activity on the shelf, and that's one of the non-competitive rules of the environment. So he refused to put it away. We kept saying, you have to put it away. And then we gave him the logic. This is why we have to put it away. We have to put it away because how would you like it if you wanted to do some work and it was sitting on someone else's mat and they weren't even working with it and you just had to wait and wait and wait for it? Would you like it? That's all we had to question. It was more of a query rather than even telling him. Some parents are more concerned about the safety and security aspects and maybe even a communication the school is giving, teacher to child ratio, so the more like administrative things. And then you have those other parents who would be asking more questions regarding the academics. It is, and if you read about Maria Montessori and her initial school that she opened up, it was actually for special needs children. Which then was so successful that she realized maybe this would also work for the normal or average child. It works in terms of the fact that children can work towards their own pace, so that individual learning is happening in the Montessori environment. We have, of course, amazing material which allows children to use their hands, that sensorial impression is building, and there's a lot of repetition they can do so, and so that aspect is there. However, sometimes the environment for certain children can be too stimulating, okay? And so, you know, a child who is already overstimulated, if there's an environment which is like, wow, they won't focus on their piece of work, they would want to keep going and taking something else. So that's one slight drawback for special needs, but overall, the concept of Montessori and the material works great for special needs. I think I've heard things like, isn't Montessori too slow? So that's one thing I've heard, and I say we're following the child, we're not pressurizing the child. So, so that's one really common one which I've heard. And they also think that we don't teach them language, we don't teach them maths, and like I've already explained, there's a lot of language, maths, probably more than traditional. We touched on a lot more concepts than in traditional education. But there may be the point that we work with a child at their own pace, right? So that's where there's a little bit of okay, but you're not fast enough. So that it's, yeah, so that's usually one of the biggest misconceptions, I would say. There's different qualifications around the world. One of the main and world-renowned qualification, the most, probably the one that most Montessorians know of, is the AMI training. And then there is other courses that I also would or could recommend, which is the MCI course based in the UK, the AMS course based in America. So those are the few of the main Montessori training that you must do to become a Montessori teacher. It's a 9-10 month training course, very intense. So in that you would learn obviously the philosophy, the method, the presentations in great detail. So with us we have a program 2 to 6. So I think that then takes them into the first grade automatically if they stay with us until the age of 6. A lot of children do leave earlier at 4, 5, which of course, you know, it's from a Montessorian perspective, we wish we can have them until the end of the program because there's so much for them to still learn. However, I think, so generally there is no kind of transition required if that's what your question is meaning. So they would just go in at the age of 6 to wherever they, into their main school. Definitely. It's, you know, if you want me to do, you know, what I told you about the maths, language, the culture, and as we move on, I would even like to talk about the elementary area as well, where you would learn all the areas, like in terms of history, further maths, and all the science is all covered. So academically, it's all there, but it's taught in a very different way. It's not in a structured, same kind of structures, non-integrated way. It's very integrated. You would learn, just say, history through asking a question. That one question would probe a lot of questions which need to be answered. So in a Montessori environment, it's very easy. It's the whole setting which takes care of that. So because there's freedom of movement, there's socializing happening naturally, children can work, collaborate with their friends, and that's when things are tapped into. I think when you're given children that opportunity to have that freedom to walk around, choose who they want to work with, who they want to sit with, sometimes work, sometimes not, maybe just chat with their friends. A lot of things come up, you know, they come up to the surface, and that's when it gives us and them the opportunity to learn from that, right? So we're giving them this learning environment socially as well as emotionally for them to build. So it's just very natural in a Montessori environment. So that's when the teachers do come in. They're the bridge, yes? So they would ensure that there is a balance happening in each area, which is of course in terms of their work, and in terms of how they are socializing. So that is the teacher's role, you know, to ensure that is balance. And like I said, there's that freedom, there's a grace and courtesy happening, and then the teachers would do a lot of observations. That's one very important aspect of Montessori education, where for the teachers to actually learn the children and see their needs, their emotional needs, their social needs, and what is happening. The teachers do observe. They sit down passively, you know, they're not active in the environment, and they're just watching the children, and they would have a question in their mind. So their question in their mind might be, how are the children socializing in my classroom? And so they would obviously observe that, and then, you know, from the observations they can decide what to do next. So it's very simple. We have a record keeping system, and our teachers would have certain children under them, so they wouldn't be tracking their progress. So it's more just tracking the progress and seeing where they are, and like we said, it's according to the child's pace. So if a child needs an extra month on a maths activity because they really aren't getting it, they get that time. Once they have understood that, the rest might accelerate. So we don't stress so much on that. We always have faith that once they have mastered something, something else might flow very quickly. So so generally the forgress has always been tracked in that way. I think in the Montessori way, we generally don't like to even say we push a child or force a child. We keep offering the child, okay? So we offer them activities. If they say no to something, we might offer something else. So we call it directed choice, because generally a child is making their own choices in their environment. But if we feel a child isn't working and we would like them to work and do something, and we think it's time, or With our older children in particular, sometimes we do have a little bit of a plan for them, saying, okay, we would like you to do one language, one maths activity per day. Now, if they haven't done it for one day, fine. But if now it's becoming a pattern every day, they're refusing, then we would generally give them a directed choice. And that would mean that we would say, okay, would you like to take this maths activity or this one? So find a way to get them into doing the maths activity in whichever way. There's also another thing sometimes we feel is when a child isn't interested, let's find, we know usually what their interest is. For example, it might be nature. And just say they don't want to do the maths activity, but we know they're interested in nature. How do we connect the two? So we might say, okay, instead of using our little boring counters that we have, why not use leaves? So we would adapt that activity for the child if they really are refusing it and we feel like we need to kind of do a little bit more to coax the child to do something to off their level and their readiness. I think initially there's a lot of just building security for the child. So, and generally a lot of children, it happens just if they need that time alone initially in their environment, and the material, them achieving things through the activities generally builds their confidence. Okay, so with that building of confidence, you always, and I've seen this in many situations, that children naturally come out of their shells. So we don't really push it. We allow that to happen in a more organic, natural way. Okay, so like I mentioned before, the mixed age groups, so of course it does. So like, but when you said the word sit in the same class, they don't sit in the same class. They're in the same environment, moving around, working with different activities. There's a lot of freedom of movement. Okay, so why it works, I'll just repeat again, is because the older children, they get a lot of opportunity to help the younger ones, lead them, build their confidence, crystallize the knowledge that the activities, the work they have done in the past, they get that opportunity to go back to it, teach the younger ones, and something else will click when they're teaching that, right? And then for the younger ones, it's amazing how much they observe the older ones, respect the older ones, and they are organically learning because it's going in. Their hands might not be ready. Intellectually, they're not ready to do that work. But they're taking it in still. As we know, there's a concept in Montessori which is called absorbent mind. So everything that they're seeing at that age is going in just like a sponge. So whether they're doing it or not, you know, that's not the matter. They're still learning. Passive learning is happening. So I think that's the fundamental in this. Maybe our older children can get into a little pattern of thought is, you're my friend, you're not my friend. So you may hear that, okay? So it's a sort of, it's a very kind of slight bullying. It's a bit of like neglect. It's like, you're my friend, I want to work with you, but you're not my friend, so I'm not going to work with you. We generally, if our team or if I pick up on this or the teachers pick up on this, this is something we correct immediately. Yes, definitely the first most important thing is independence. So of course from the minute the child walks into our environment, we're teaching them everything on how to do for themselves. And how to do for themselves has many benefits. Of course it builds their confidence, it makes them less inferior to their environment. And they are doing for themselves. They're building their coordination. They're able to do things. So it just gives them that encouragement that in the home environment they can even try to help. So I think freedom of choice. Why I think that is a key is because with freedom of choice, children learn to get to know themselves. And I think in life, making decisions is something which is a fundamental. It's such a huge life lesson. If you're able to make good decisions, then you are able to it frees you. It gives you a lot of opportunity in life without fear that you can make decisions. It's okay sometimes if you make mistakes. And so within the Montessori environment, the freedom of choice, allowing children to make choices, and through their own choices, they They can also make mistakes. Sometimes they'll make choices where it's superficial, and then they realize, okay, no, this is what I really want to do, and they get to that point themselves. So they get to know themselves. So with that ending line of Montessori again, Marie Montessori, when she says the idea of education should be to reveal the child's true nature, I would say have faith in your child, relax, and go out there to every type of school, type of education method there is, and learn for your own self on what fits you and your child and your philosophies. So this is very important for you to learn and understand, and then come to your decision on what you would like the most and the best for your child. Namaste, I'm Payal, and Moms Know Best.